even care. Hey. Hey, girl. Hi.
We're having a hard time finding a boat ramp because the lake's so flooded. So we're heading to like our third boat ramp. I'll try to find a good spot. Don't really know yet. Yeah.
I'm coming.
All right. Big smallmouth. Keeper. Oh no!
It's okay.
Try to boat flip a 3.5 pound smallmouth. Oh yeah. It ain't a keeper.
Why? Because it's a smallmouth?
It's gotta be 18.
Is that smallmouth?
Yeah. That first one I caught was too.
Or is it a keeper?
Yeah, the first one's a lot bigger. It's about maybe 16th. I'll measure it just to see. 17. That's a 17 incher right there.
Smack it.
That's me.
Smack it. Use it.
What am I gonna want? I got it. Hey guys, I noticed that the footage on Lake Cumberland kind of cut off pretty abruptly. This is because the boat ramps were really dangerous and I was trying to get the boat out of the water before it got too dark. That way it wouldn't be too dangerous for me and Amber. But I figured I'd take this time to go over the baits I was using and the technique that I was running around and doing on Lake Cumberland to catch some fish. If you fish Lake Cumberland often or have been watching the news lately in Kentucky, you'll know that the water is higher right now in Lake Cumberland than it ever has been. And that's pretty amazing. So before going out there, I knew that I was going to focus my attention on the channel swing bluff walls. This is because these bluff walls allow the fish to move up and down them very easily as much as the water has been fluctuating lately. Also, the flatter banks were almost impossible to fish because there were so many trees under the water that you couldn't get your bait to the fish. Usually this time of year on Lake Cumberland, especially pre-fishing for a tournament, I would be opted to throw a crankbait. And this is because you can cover a lot of water and it's also a really good technique to use on Lake Cumberland. The problem with the crankbait is, even on the bluff walls, there were trees under the water and there was so much trash against the banks because where the water was up so high that it was almost impossible to throw it effectively. So before going on Lake Cumberland, I had watched some other YouTube videos and I'd seen this technique, so I figured I would share it with you guys. So if you were going out on Lake Cumberland anytime soon, you could maybe try it and catch some fish yourself. This technique was using a half-ounce football jig. This is actually a D&L football jig. It's just a green pumpkin. It's got some purple in it. Any color would work. And the trailer I put on it, it doesn't really matter, but I was using an Ultra Vibe Speed Crawl. And I was dipping the pinchers of it in JJ's Magic. That was just to make the pinchers orange because the water was pretty stained where it's been raining so much. And I think it just gave a little pop to the bait. And it was the technique I was using as a reaction strike, so I think the bright orange kind of just gave them something to target on. That kind of leads me into the technique I was using. I wasn't fishing the jig like you would normally fish a jig. I wasn't throwing it out there and, you know, jigging it, working it back to the bank. I was fishing it more like a crankbait than I was a jig, really. I was covering as much water as I would have been throwing a crankbait. Like I said, I'm fishing like pretty much vertical bluff walls, and I had never really had any experience doing this either. So it was a new technique for me too, but I'm sure it would work for you. What I was doing is you have to play with the brakes on your reel, and you have to set them really loose to where it almost free spools. And the reason for this is because you want this bait to fall vertically down the bluff wall. You don't want it to pendulum back to the boat. If you have any tension against the bait, it's just going to pendulum back under the boat, and you're not going to stay against that bluff wall like you need to. What I was doing is I was making a flip cast and pretty much just flipping the bait up there and letting it free spool right down the bluff wall. And there would be some benches and stuff that, stuck out on these bluff walls. And the bait would fall, down the bluff wall, and it would hit one of these benches. And then as soon as it would stop, I never let the bait sit. I constantly moved the bait. And as soon as it would hit one of those benches, I would drag it off and just let it keep free falling. And you want to leave a bow in your line and, slack so that it can fall straight down the bluff wall. But these fish were actually picking it up as it was falling down the bluff wall. And it was more of a reaction strike than anything. And these big smallmouth, I guess, are just kind of, sitting against those bluff walls. And I would only let my bait fall about 20 feet, and then I would reel it up and I'd make another flip. I was never letting the bait sit. It was constantly moving. I was fishing about as fast as I would be fishing a crankbait. And I think this is a really good technique because, one, it covers water, and two, you're throwing a bait that gets big bites. And that's exactly what it did on this day. So if you all are going to Lake Cumberland soon, or any lake, they're pretty much all flooded right now because we've been getting so much rain in Kentucky. But you should definitely try this technique. It's pretty much like swimming a jig, except it's, vertically swimming a jig. It's a little bit different approach. It's a little bit different technique, but it really worked for me, and I'm sure it would work for you. Thanks for watching the video.